Hello, this is Bill Moreland with BankReg Data. Today we're going to take a look at one of the questions I often get, which is, can you predict whether or not a bank is going to have more charge-offs or not in the upcoming quarter or two? And typically what I tell people is, yeah. I mean, obviously you don't have a crystal ball. You can't see every single event that's going to happen in advance. But are there metrics you can take a look at that would give you an indication of whether or not a bank is managing through their collection shop charge-offs? And I say this as a as a former manager at Wells Fargo of managing charge-offs, and the word would come down from on high. Hey, look, we're having a great quarter. Go ahead and clean your books up. Hey, look, the quarter is going to be a challenge because of something that's happening in auto or card or commercial. We need you to basically, kind of manage. So how do you manage charge-offs? Well, you just take a promise. Several ways you can do this, but one is just take a promise. If you basically get a promise to pay on someone who's late stage, you can pend it as a payment coming. Even though at the end of the quarter you really don't have the money in yet, you can say, hey, that payment is coming. So you can certainly manage these numbers coming from someone who's done it, right? And this is normal, and banks should be allowed to do this. The question is if they're publicly traded or you're another bank and you're looking at a peer bank and you see that your peer banks all have low charge-off numbers, go take a look. Are they managing those numbers? So I'm going to take a look at two examples, Valley National and Zions, all right? There's nothing magical about these two. I looked at 5 banks. These two were the best examples. They were 5 random banks. So there's nothing cherry-picked about this. But if you basically come in and you take a look, with Valley National, you can see a couple of periods where you start to see some spikes and some valleys. If you take a look at Zion's banks, you see a couple of spikes, you see another spike, you see another spike, you see some valleys. So I'm going to go ahead and move Zion's off the screen for a moment, and we're going to basically bring up a metric that I like to track. And this is a metric I tracked at Wells Fargo because I wanted to see what the other managers were doing in the other portfolios. So, hey, you have high charge-offs. Well, yeah, because I'm taking them. These guys aren't. Not narking, just trying to put into perspective what's going on, right? Why numbers look the way they look. So the metric is non-performing loans to charge-offs. And essentially what we're looking at here is adjusted NPLs. So this takes away the government guarantees that exist. So you can see a bank that has a ton, like 1 to 4 family. You go look at some banks like EverBank, they have Bank of America, they have massive NPLs to charge-off ratio, but they're government guaranteed. Now, that doesn't mean there's not questions about why there's so many delinquencies in the government guaranteed portfolios, but that's a topic for another discussion. And I think one that's becoming a lot more commonly known, right? So this is adjusted NPLs is what's going to hit the bank's books if their income statement, if they have to start taking charge-offs and provision to cover those. So the way this works is for every dollar of charge-offs, how many dollars of adjusted NPLs are coming? So how many pigs are working their way through a snake? And so you can see right here, they were up to $12.32. And then they took more charge-offs, and then the ratio fell to 797. Then they took less charge-offs, and you see that over here. And then you basically see they had to take more charge-offs. So when you see these low numbers, understand those low numbers were because they were managing the delinquencies. 100%, you can see what they were doing. Dollar for dollar, you can see a drop in the charge-off amount, and you see an increase. Because their adjusted NPLs actually climbed in those 3 months. So what do you see? The number hits a peak of 30.41, and then you come in here and you see the charge-offs start to go back up, right? So basically, you got to look at the numerator and the denominator on these, right? And what are the trends? It's only up, only up, only up, only up. And so you can see how the charge-off numbers. So come in here where you see the number basically falls all the way down. Look at that. You can see it dropping. So was it predictable that they were going to start taking charge-offs during this time frame? Could you predict that the charge-offs were going to go up in a couple of quarters? Yes. So for every kind of dip, now, can they sell the notes? Can they basically cure? Can they pay off? right? There's a lot of ways that the denominator or the adjusted NPLs can come down. But in this instance right there, when you were looking at that number right there and saying, oh my gosh, it's $103 million in 24 Q4, is the number going to go up and be even higher in Q1, Q2, Q3 of 2025? And I would have said, no. I mean, they basically have worked through a ton of their charge-offs. Their NPLs per charge-off dollars have come down to $3.53. But now what do you see? It's back up. So this $16.5 million of charge-offs is the best charge-off number they've had in 2.5 years. You have to go all the way back here. And I would say, but it's fake. It's being managed. You're seeing an enormous increase from $8 to $26 in essentially what that ratio, NPLs to charge-offs. So the fact that that's $16 million, the fact that they can report it in their earnings statement and you can get all excited about it, it's being managed. And there's nothing wrong with being managed. But now the question is what's going to happen in Q4. So we'll come back and we'll look at Valley National in another few weeks as all these banks start filing. And if they're having a good quarter, I imagine they'll take more charge-offs. If they're having not such a great quarter, it's entirely possible that that number may fall to 12 and their provision would go to 12. And everyone in Wall Street will love it because their provision is so low and their earnings are better. But understand this ratio drives essentially what's going to happen in the upcoming quarters. All right. So we're going to take a look at Zions, right? So it's going to come over here. We're going to pull up Zions. We see the same chart. And we see on the right-hand side, we're going to bring it back over, and we're going to take a look at their NPLs to charge-offs. And so where do you start to see low numbers? You see low numbers right there, 9 and 8 million, 9 and 7 million. But their ratios are pretty high, right? $14, $22. And is it surprising that that number went up? No, because essentially they're getting increased pressure on their NPLs, which, by the way, they all are, right? And so during this time frame, they look very similar to Valley. But notice how that number fell from $21 to $7. And then it kind of went down, and then it started going back up, right? So then we see it builds. It's all the way back up to $23. And we can see that these numbers right there look really good during late 23 and early 24. Oh my gosh, $40 million. Could you have predicted it? Well, yeah, because you can't sustain $23.47 for very long. That number is elevated. The reason it's elevated is being managed. So what they were doing, I'm guessing, is they were trying to figure out what their quarterly numbers were going to be, and they needed to hit certain numbers. They're going to figure out what their year-end numbers are, and they could release. So then all of a sudden, the number skyrockets to $66. Is it something that we should be freaked out by? Well, no. Yeah, kind of. But the number, their Q4 numbers are probably going to come pretty good because they're at 467 is the lowest number that they've had in that particular data series. If we look back across time, that 467, and you can see Q3, that could be just a coincidence that the low periods, but you can see that 467, which is indicative of a very high charge-off rate figure during that quarter, probably means the following quarter is not going to be so high. So we can't say it for certain, but there is a general understanding here that you can look at a bank and you could look at that ratio, you could look at the charge-off number, come over here to get corresponding, and you can see whether or not it was a managed number, and is it clean or is it going to be just backed up, pigs backed up in the snake. You do have the ability under the loan data to come in and look at the non-performing loans to charge off by portfolio. And so if we pop down here, we can see, look at this. Now, one thing is you have to be very careful of portfolios that have a high CRE component. So let's pop over here to Zions, let's go to asset review, REO. They don't have a lot of REO, so that's probably not going to be as a big issue. But basically, loan sales will also affect this number. But you can see the massive numbers in the 1 to 4, right? So part of this is essentially going to be, do they have government guaranteed loans? So what are the caveats to this ratio? Well, the caveats to this ratio are whether or not government guarantees exist. Excuse me. So when you come into the 1-4 family portfolio, we don't have the ability to look at adjusted NPLs at the portfolio level. But most 1-4 portfolios, if they have NPLs, you have to come over here to non-accrual, government guarantees under asset quality, and you have to get a feel for how many of these are their book versus the taxpayer/government. So you see 13.416. My guess is that's probably SBA, although I don't see 100% accurate reporting all the time in here. It's either something that I'm missing or it's being logged in the wrong category. Probably a mixture of both. But basically what you're looking at here is this bank is taking no charge-offs at all. It is not uncommon to see 1-4 be very high. And that's partly because of the government guarantees. But if we take a look at owner occupied, you can see that they're not taking any charge-offs at all. And this could be where there's a considerable amount of government guarantees with SBA 7s. So you have to be careful of 1-4, and you have to be careful with some of the other ones. But if you come, and you see home equity has that because that's a 1-4 portfolio. But if you start basically cycling through some of these portfolios, you can get a pretty good feel for, right, here we go. This is 100%. So it works here. You can come in and look at the C&I. There's not an REO component. It's basically 100% delaying charge-offs. Notice how their charge-offs on their C&I was just $2.7 million. Great quarter. We're starting the year off so well, but you didn't, right? Your NPLs on that portfolio actually climbed from 65 to 77. The only reason your C&I NPLs or charge-offs were so good is because you just didn't take any. Did you have to take some? Yeah, the very next quarter. That ratio went right back down to 3. But then what do you see? The ratio builds every quarter. Well, why? They are taking some charge-offs, but notice how fast their NPLs are building. Then all of a sudden, they flush the books right there and take $37 million. So if you come in and you're basically looking at this particular portfolio and you're looking at the charge-offs and you see these big, massive spikes, it's because they were delaying them up until then, and then they started to take them. So when you look at this 6.7 million, now you have to say, well, there's a couple of things. One, it's building again, and every time they get to that 15, 20 mark, they seem to clear it up. So there's a possibility the C&I portfolio is going to take a hit, but you can see that portfolio is basically working its way down on delinquencies. So that portfolio is getting better. So I think there will take more charge-offs, but I don't think you're going to be looking at a 37, 20 million type of number. Just curious. Yeah, they are taking quite a bit of modifications, but not huge numbers. I mean, it's less than 1%. So I think those numbers are pretty good for C&I. But can you predict charge-offs? Not 100%, right? There is no crystal ball. But can you get a feel for whether or not a bank is managing their numbers? Certainly. And the way to look at that is the NPL to charge-off ratio. The one or two caveats are be careful of REOs, portfolios that are heavy REO, because they will not charge off the full dollar amount, right? They'll charge off the market value loss. The REO amount will slide over. So if there's a note sale and they take a charge off to get rid of that loan, or if there's an REO component, you will sometimes end up with elevated CRE books that aren't 100% reflective, especially also if there's government guarantees. So it's going to be CRE, it's going to be Resi. They're going to be primarily affected by this. It's a slick ratio. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and give me a call. Happy to help out in any way I can. Appreciate your time. Thank you.